Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright and sunny day. It is Saturday the 4th of May and I'm in the reading nook with a nice hot cup of tea and a book or a box to unbox. And what I've got in here is a copy of George Errington, A Test Pilot's Story. So George Errington was a well-known and popular test pilot from 1935 to 1955. So his name appeared frequently in aviation magazines at the time, and he ranks with the like of Cunningham, Duke, Falk and Lithgow. He joined the Airspeed Company of Portsmouth in 1934 and became their chief test pilot in 1939, when test flying was vastly different from today. During the Second World War, he was responsible for much of the testing of the Horsa assault glider, which included a number of incidents. After the war, he was responsible for testing the Elegant Ambassador airliner prior to its service with the BEA. And when de Havilland took over Airspeed, George moved to Hatfield in 1953, where he was involved in the flight testing and delivery of comets, herons and vampire trainers. In this book, written in cooperation with George's son, Mike Phipp tells George's story. Now, what's interesting about this is you get the story of one particular test pilot, and what's kind of forgotten today is that sort of like during the 1930s and 40s and right through to the 50s was a period of furious aerospace engineering and aeronautical science sort of like development, obviously spurred on by the oncoming war and then the outbreak of war itself and so on and so on, and into the post-war period where you had massive investment in the new aeroplanes of the period, the jets, which were essentially were new technology, relatively new technology by then, and so nobody had quite had an idea of how they would work or fly and so on in the long term, and they really kind of explored the limits of the technology. So you had lots of different manufacturers and designers working on these new designs, airplanes, some of which are groundbreaking, some of which were sort of like doomed to failure. And the launch of every new aircraft, every sort of like would be sort of like heralded with garland with praise and so on and promise. And so the test pilots themselves, who would obviously be testing them sort of like privately with the company and so on, but would fly them at air shows where they became sort of the equivalent of aeronautical rock stars. Obviously the one sort of like that everyone kind of knows is Eric Pickle Brown, who has hundreds of hours on flying in testing planes and so on. So I picked this up because essentially this is obviously it says well known, the likes of Cunningham, Duke, Falk and Lithgow. Well, I don't know those names particularly. I've read a couple of books on the subject, but not one recently. So I thought, this looks interesting, and it's relatively short. So, the contents and credits page, forward and acknowledgements, and an introduction, and then how George Errington started out in aviation. And it was a lot easier then, learning to fly was cheaper, less regulated, and it was relatively easy to get some lessons, get the hours of training you needed in your logbook, and so on. And so this is sort of taking the Errington from its early days through to learning to fly, and working for Airspeed, where the designs were moving slowly on from biplanes to monoplanes, and beginning to look like the aircraft that we would recognise as an aircraft today. The biplanes are not something that anybody's really building today. There are plenty of them about, but they are really sort of like relics of a previous age. So you know, this is basically his experience. Has experience flying in China. Basically, airspeed received an order for an Envoy 3 from the military governor of Guangxi province in southern China. So he's got to fly it there. There we go. So that's quite a flight. You know, that is all the way across Europe and Asia. And then we're looking at the beginning of sort of like military orders with the oncoming war with Nazi Germany. Signs of a disastrous crash there. There's also testing of seaplanes. And his experiences in World War II. That's an excerpt from his logbook, which basically here he's recording all of his flight hours, and here is essentially where he's testing the Horsa being the glider that would, in the latter part of the war, especially for the D-Day landings, would land basically troops and equipment in northern France. So there you can see essentially a jeep being loaded onto a Horsa, and then it's being towed. There was a shot from a Halifax bomber was being used to tow the glider, and he's basically going on and testing mosquitoes and Spitfires, which is going to be absolutely probably more exciting than gliders. But gliders are kind of, I suppose, unpowered flight, so it's almost, you know, it's almost more natural in a sense, because you're relying upon the wind and basically the updrafts and the heat of the air around you, and sort of like, so this is Ambassador, sort of like the prototype for the Ambassador. To a passenger liner shortly after the war. So you can see it is liberally illustrated with photographs, and then here we move onto the purchase of airspeed by de Havilland and Errington's move from being a test pilot from airspeed to Havilland. Essentially, you know, a really very well-known manufacturer, obviously for the Mosquito, but also for the Comet, which was ultimately a disaster because of manufacturing deficiencies. But you know, basically we're also flying like this, the Vampire Trainer, which is essentially one of the early jets used by the British post-World War II, and so on. And then, so essentially, this is George and his wife sitting at home at Rockwood, and just north of Ringwood, an area I know reasonably well. And this enjoyment also not just of flying fast, but speeding fast as well. So yeah, and then we'll have sort of finally tribute to George Errington. And there he is. And that's George Errington, a test pilot story. I think it's going to be an interesting bit of history. I look forward to giving this a read. Just to sort of fill out my knowledge, sort of alongside sort of like the books like Pickle, the book about Eric basically the amazing test pilot. But there are plenty of other test pilots who were very well renowned in the period, and this is obviously one of them. Anyway, thank you for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you enjoyed this, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you take the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be able to see more unboxings of the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a box containing a book or game which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea, then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.